James is calling from Arizona. Go ahead with your thoughts, James.
Well, as I submit to you, it has nothing to do with politics that poor reporter had his head chopped off. It has everything to do with that person believing that Allah is God, Allah is great, and Muhammad is his messenger, and jihad commands him to do such things like that to anybody that isn't a follower. And I don't mean to suggest that all Muslims want to chop infidels' heads off, but there is a serious infestation in a huge part of the world called the Middle East, where there are literally tens of millions of people that do think that's really cool and that it is just and right thing to do. What say you, Derek J?
Well, killing people is not the right thing to do. They're mistaken.
I know you don't think that. I'm asking you, what say you about my assertion that there's tens of millions of young men your age in the Middle East, and I can rattle off a bunch of countries, that all think that what that happened to that poor reporter was really cool, really just, and the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's really
sick.
You? That's really sick. That you could be right. I really don't know. I haven't been to the Middle East. I don't know many people from the Middle East. It's sort of foreign to me, and it's a foreign culture. I'm not Muslim, or I have very little relations with that.
Again, may I interrupt real quick, because this is important.
Yeah, this is
Don't use the Muslim word. Don't use the Muslim word, because I'm not trying to impugn all Muslims. But the one that did that to that poor reporter is a murderer who believes that in Islamism, as in spreading Islam by force, in ridding the world of people that aren't Islamic in their sense of the word.
I appreciate you making that distinction. That's one I might adopt myself, because I hate when Muslims get thrown under the bridge or thrown under the bus for just having that same religion as murderers. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. I will have to watch the video to see what the man says. It's probably religiously motivated, but I don't think he shares the same religion as most.
It would have to have subtitles for you to, for my assertion to be affirmed.
Yeah.
So one doesn't believe that it needs to be having such. But I'm sure there's an English version out there. I just wanted to, because that was the last thing you spoke of in the hour, and I had to call in to respond to that, because it outrages me when I hear such things. It has nothing to do with politics.
Well, the reason I said that it's politics is because whether the leaders of a country are criminal terrorists like ISIS, or whether they're just regular terrorists like Vladimir Putin, they negotiate in terms of force. They speak blood, not negotiations. And this is their tool. They're saying, we have one of your living human beings who's owned by you, Obama, so I'm going to kill one of your cattle here, and how many cattle will you withstand being killed? That's how they negotiate. These people, I guess they don't see human beings here. They just see
pawns. That's why it's called terrorism, and they are terrorists.
So,
and they're not.
Yeah, it's very sad. I don't know what can be done except for people to stop supporting wars of aggression in Iraq. These U.S. airstrikes.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
What?
See, the terrorists and their religious fanaticism predates all the wars of aggression that you call them.
Right, but two wrongs don't make a right.
You call them wars of aggression. Well, yeah, they do.
Excuse me?
You call them wars of aggression. If they were wars of aggression, I would agree with you that they were wrong. They're called wars of defense.
They're U.S. airstrikes. I mean, what is Iraq doing to Americans?
Okay, they're striking ISIS in Iraq, who moved into Iraq after Americans moved out.
But don't you think that civilians? But don't you think innocent civilians get hit by those airstrikes?
Yeah, and I blame the murderers that are surrounding the mountain where the people have fled to for those killings.
Don't you think
Just like
there's another solution, something more targeted than an airstrike? It just seems like too many civilians get killed with this.
I've advocated the use of drones to get rid of their preachers of hate before their little clans go on the offensive themselves.
Yeah.
I've advocated that before and been branded a murderer, which is it's a endless what you call war, but I call it an endless circle of it's when you blame murderers. Forgive me. You and your friends on this network, your fellow co-hosts, always seem to have an excuse for murderers by blaming other people other than the murderers themselves.
Well, wait a minute. They're all murderers. The people who are committing airstrikes are murderers, and the people who are terrorists called ISIS are murderers. They're all murderers.
Okay. I suggest to you that the people that are bombing ISIS are certainly killers.
Yeah.
Just like my old man, Derek, is buried in Arlington.
Oh, I see.
Well, my old man's buried in Arlington National Cemetery with a bunch of fellow killers. And the Nazis weren't going to give up and surrender until they were literally annihilated by being killed. That's what ended World War II. They had their whole counterculture club eliminated. They had to be eliminated because they were not going to surrender. And I don't blame you for, like I asked you the question and along the same lines last time we spoke as we came to a commercial break. If you were to pull your gun out on somebody in self-defense and you were to terminate them in self-defense, does that make you a killer or does that make you a murderer?
Well, that would be a killer, because a murderer is someone who takes another's life like with intention, and I wasn't intending to kill someone that night. You know,
do you think if there was no such thing as ISIS and there was no such thing as jihadism and Islamism, do you think that the United States of America would be dropping bombs on anybody that might be innocent, that has the misfortune of being in the way of or in the presence of a member of ISIS?
I do, because look at the history. Look at the history of the U.S. empire. They've always been at war. There's almost been no periods of prolonged peace in the United States. And then before them it was the Anglo-American Empire. Before them it was the British Empire. Before them, you know, it's always been this way, right? So then you should know that it's always been the nature of governments to grow and expand, and at the time when it's time for them to collapse, they go to war. That's what's happening with the U.S. empire.
You should know that the U.S. empire again pulled out of Iraq. And now ISIS moved
in. What meaningful way did the U.S. empire pull out of Iraq? I'd love to know, because Obama said the war is over, and then he pulled out troops, right? But aren't there still troops on the ground?
No. We don't have any troops in Iraq. None. Absolutely none. We had 100,000.
What are they called, though? Did they give them some other name? They're like government trainers, they're like assistants, or they're like the Obamacare
advisors. The euphemism is advisors.
Okay,
and we have,
so there are how many tens of thousands of advisors are in Iraq?
Since this whole ISIS thing came up, President Obama, I believe, ordered 100 advisors back to Iraq. We had none there at the present before this thing broke out 2 months ago.
Well, some people in the chat room say that 130 U.S. troops are in Iraq. I guess that might be the same figure that you're talking about. It's all very confusing to me, and it's a tragedy. I don't claim to be an expert on this stuff. I'm just reading the news as it comes to me on the internet, and I feel sad about it. I appreciate your call, James. Thank you. Yeah, so unfortunately we ran up against the break, but it is. It's totally confusing to me. I just want the killing to stop. I want the cycle of violence has to end somewhere.
Yeah, I don't think you respectfully ever have listened to a damn thing I've said to you.
I hear you. You're saying it's justified.
The cycle of violence. Okay, if you kill somebody in self-defense, you're not starting anything. They started it. But that cycle of violence is ended if you...
But it never ends.
Successfully. Okay, it will never end as long as people take this... what you would call a fairy tale, the Quran, as long as millions of people, I'm not talking about your friend Dobby, I'm talking about people that live over there that really do carry machine guns and dress like members of the Klan with eye slits. So long as they take their holy book deadly serious, and their Muhammad's hadith and the commandments to kill non-believers, in other words, murder them, so long as millions of people take that seriously, the cycle of violence, as you call it, will never end. And it's not anybody's fault that goes up against them and says, you know what, you're an existential threat, we're going to terminate you. It's not their fault. It wasn't my fault, my dad's fault, that he had to kill people to end Nazism. They started it, we put an end to it. And since 1945,
but not
Jay,
successfully.
I can name all the wars.
I don't think you ended your father ended the Second World War successfully. Communism continues to spread. Fascism still exists.
I agree with you. The Cold War happened after 1945 because we let the Russians stay in Germany. We didn't push them out. And there's a whole other historical wishful thinking, imaginations I could go in with you about how that should have never happened if the United States of America had done what Patton had warned, and many other Americans, and the Allied High Command made so many mistakes after Hitler finally topped himself, because the Russians stuck around in the entire Eastern Europe after they chased the Germans back into Berlin. They just stuck around. Now, the United States of America stuck around in Western Europe, and the Russians never moved into Western Europe, thank God, because Americans stuck around in the hundreds of thousands, and they were armed and dangerous to the Russians. So communism never spread into Western Europe. But since they were already in Eastern Europe, it stayed. But I don't want to... Okay, all the wars you think that have this endless cycle of wars, again, we left Kuwait in 1991 after driving Saddam Hussein out the first time, and it wasn't America's fault that we returned 13 years later. It was the bastard and the mass murderer and his willing executioner's fault for us returning, not America's. And Iraq was a better place up until 3 years ago, before Obama ordered the troops out.
I think the point at which we disagree, I think we even agree on this point about voluntarily funding wars that we support or not, is I just want out of these wars. While you think they're justified, while you say they're important and necessary, you may be right, but I don't want to support them. I don't want to have to pay for them. I don't want to have my name on these bullets.
You're making were made in 1939 after Hitler's army leveled Warsaw and destroyed most of Poland.
And I wish we had gotten to see what it would look like if people like me were able to take their money out.
Okay, that's before the United States of America went over there, Derek J. For 2 years, Hitler's armies built...
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I gotta let you go. We're coming back. Sorry.
I know.
All right, bye.